me say a special good morning to everyone who are listening this morning, especially those of you via Classic 105. For those of you who are viewing via GBN TV, welcome. Let me take the time out also to say good morning to our social media platforms, Facebook, the YouTube channel. Good morning and welcome everyone to another edition of To The Point. It's Friday, end of the week. Vast majority, you're probably happy. It's the end of the week, so your work week may have ended or maybe ending today. Yeah, you have the entire weekend off. Let me say good morning to my guest this morning, and we have for you, that's Chanel Phillp from the Grenada Child Protection Authority, just the Child Protection. I can just refer to that as Child Protection Authority. And good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And Chanel Phillp, she's the Alternative Care Supervisor at the Child Protection Authority. Just in a brief description of your role. I understand I did say supervisor already, but yes. Give us a brief description of your role at the Child Protection Authority.
Okay, so I supervise the alternative care team, which comprises of 6 social workers who are responsible for the care of children in foster care, kinship care and residential homes. We also manage the adoptions in Grenada.
Right.
So we have a dual role. So it's foster care, so any child who's in alternative care placement, i.e. they're not at home with their birth parents, and all children that are going through the process of adoption.
Right.
Is what we do in a nutshell.
All right, interesting. Now let's get into our conversation this morning. We're going to be focusing a lot on alternative care and adoption.
Yes.
You know, just for the pleasure of the viewing and listening audience, maybe the interest of myself. How prevalent is adoption in Grenada?
We have more than you would think.
Yeah.
We have a lot of adoptions locally where people come to us with a child that they already have in their care, a family member maybe, a child that they was assisting with, and they want to formalise the arrangement so that child can become a legal part of their family to entitle them to inheritance and, you know, all the rights of a birth child. So we have a lot of adoptions like that. And then we have international adoptions where the child is identified here as a child with no parents, no family, and we would then have them adopted internationally, depending on if there's any carers who match here. We always try to adopt here first if there's potential adopters without a child who wants to adopt. And as I said, most of our local adoptions are for people who have already identified a child. Although we do have some who take a child through the system.
Okay, let's talk a little bit, and maybe we could spend a little time on it. Alternative care. Give us a little idea about that before we dive much deeper into it. When we say alternative care,
right,
there folks may grab the attention of some what you mean by alternative.
So what we mean by alternative is any type of care placement that is not with your birth family. So Johnny's born to Susie and John. He's removed from them for whatever reason. Anywhere he lives after home is an alternative care placement. Now that could be a kinship placement that is with family members or friends of the family, which is still approved and managed by us at the authority, but it's with people that the child may already know.
Okay.
Then we have foster care, which is care with an approved foster carer who has no relation to the child nor their family, and they are working with the Child Protection Authority to provide home placements for children who for whatever reason cannot be with their birth parents. We also have residential care, which is children's homes. So we have several children's homes around the island, and they provide care for children who we cannot get into a foster placement for whatever reason, and then they will remain in residential care while we look at what their care plan is. The plan is for whatever type of care the child is in, there's always a working plan to A, reunite them with their family, or B, adopt them. A is always our first preference, and if they cannot be reunited with their birth parents, then we look to reunite them into a kinship care placement. Kinship care there's no one viable for kinship care, there's no one coming forward to claim this child, then we have to look at a long-term solution. The child cannot just stay in the foster care system or the alternative care system for the rest of its life. It's not fair to that child. And that's when we start looking at adoption for those children.
When does the Child Protection Authority actually steps in? At what stage? In terms of if you do it for the alternative care or for adoption, when does the Child Protection Authority actually steps in?
Right, so we step in at any stage I just talked about. But how it normally works is we'd receive a referral from the public, from a teacher, from a health profession, from a lawyer, from whoever is aware that there's a child with a need. And when I say a need, a child who's being abused, at risk of abuse, is not being cared for properly, neglect, parents with substance misuse, even parents who don't have that support, so then the child's being left home alone while mum goes to work or dad goes to work. So any kind of referral, now we say to the public, everyone has a duty to refer, and there are some professionals who are bound by law to refer. So if a teacher is aware, by virtue of your profession, anyone who has direct contact with children, if you're aware of a child at risk, you have a duty to report. I mean, the law goes as far that if you don't report, that you could be fined yourself for not reporting that abuse. So the referral comes in. We do an investigation, so we'll go out, meet the family, meet the children, speak to teachers, neighbours, to establish what is actually happening for this child. If in that investigation it's deemed that the parents are incapable at this time, for whatever reason, to provide the care and protection that that child needs, that is when we would remove the child from their parents' care and place them in alternative care. First stop would be kinship care, so we'd be saying to mum, or dad, or parents together, we've deemed that this is not going to work for the safety of the child. So have you got someone who the child could be cared for while we're working with you to look at your issues and see how we can assist you with interventions to overcome whatever issues they're facing. So they may say, well, yes, my mum, my sister, my auntie. We would then assess that person. We wouldn't just say, okay, fine, there go. We would have to go to that person's home. We'd have to look at their home environment. We'd have to look at their own social history, their own children, just to make sure that we are placing the child in a better environment. No point taking you from the frying pan and putting you in the fire.
Absolutely.
It needs to be...
Makes no sense.
It makes no sense. So our assessment process can be a bit intrusive, and some people say, well, it's my cousin, she's always here, what are you asking me all of that for? But we have to make sure we've done our due diligence.
Is that cousin capable of taking care of that child?
Thank you. Is your home environment a place that's conducive to the care and protection of this child? So we'll make that assessment of that kinship carer, if there's one available, and place the child with them. Meantime, the social worker assigned to the family will be looking at what do the parents need to make their situation at home better to enable their child to be reunited with them. So that may be counselling, it may be a parenting programme, it may be a drug and alcohol programme, it may be some kind of health issue, just depending on what the circumstance is. So we will make referrals to the relevant agencies to assist the parents in bettering themselves so that they can have their children back and be able to parent them in a manner that is considered safe and promotes the welfare of the child. So all goes well, mum and dad engaging in the interventions over a period of time. We decide that, right, they're in a better place now, they're able to manage. Children are reunited with their parents. We would monitor for a 3-month period just to make sure everything's going okay. If all is well, we will withdraw.
All right.
That is the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that parents, for whatever reasons, are unable or unwilling to engage in the process, so they're not making any progress with themselves to prove that they are now more capable to care for their children. And that's when we have to start looking long term for these children. Now, if they're in a kinship care placement and that kinship carer can care for them indefinitely for the rest of the minority, we will always look at that as a preference.
All right.
I failed to add that while we're in that process, contact with parents is very important. The children and the parents should see each other regularly.
All right.
Depending on why they were removed, that contact may be supervised initially, it may be in the community, it may be then for overnight, a weekend, while we're reintroducing them back to the family. So contact is really important because we don't want to sever the bond between child and parent. Now, I can't make a parent come to contact. I can make the arrangement. I can ensure the child is available. It's for the parent to come and to have a quality contact. Engage the child, not talk about what CPA did and they come and take you. How are you doing? Letting the child know that, don't worry about me, I'm fine, I'm doing what I need to do. And having a positive engagement with that child.
Let them know that they still have that love and care for them.
They haven't forgotten them, they're not letting them go, but being child appropriate. The contact should be a time for fun, games, love. As a parent, we always say, we know this is hard. We know it's hard. Having your child removed for you, for whatever reason, is going to have an emotional toll on that parent. And so we will say to them, If you want to cry, cry before you come inside. If you want to cuss me outside, but not in front of the child. We need to be child-focused, child-friendly, so that the child doesn't then carry the burden of what's happening more than they already are, having been removed from their home.
Because it's also like a stage of rebonding with their parent again.
Exactly.
For whatever reason, they had to be removed from their parent.
Right.
No, there's a rebonding stage.
There's a rebonding stage.
And you don't want them to, for in any way, the authority wants to be the one responsible for not having that rebonding of parent and child.
Parent and child. Now, contact isn't as frequent as I would like it to be, because we have more children and not the space to facilitate these contacts as frequently. But as the alternative care supervisor, it's one of my roles to ensure that every child has contact with their parent once the parent is able and willing. Able means if you're drunk, if you're high, if you're angry, the contact can't happen, because that's not conducive for the child. Because what we want to introduce in that period is a positive interaction with the child. Now, if the child was removed because of substance abuse and they only know drunk parent, we need to introduce them to sober parent who's available to them emotionally and can meet their needs. And that is a place in contact where we can re-establish a positive interaction if previous interactions have been negative for whatever reason. So, worst case, parents cannot make it. They can't meet the intervention needs. They have not improved their ability to get their child back in their care. We have no kinship carer who's available, so the child's in foster care. Foster care is not a lifetime solution either. So while some children stay with some carers for a very long time, and some of those carers, having developed that bond, apply to adopt those children. And that can happen too. I don't like to lose all my great carers because once they start adopting, they're full and then they can't foster. Right. So the idea is that once it's established through the courts and a court order that the child is viable for adoption, so CPA can't make that decision to just adopt a child. We have to go to court. We have to go in front of a judge. Let the judge know this is our investigation, this is why we removed the child, this is what we've done to work with the family, and this is why we've come to this conclusion. The judge then decides. Now, there'll be times we've gone in front of a judge and we're like, open and shut, these children cannot go back. They need to be adopted. And the judge will say, well, did you do this? And did you do that? No, go back and do this. And they will send us back because they want to make sure if they're going to sever their parental ties with that child, that every base has been covered. So we can be back and forth. And the end will come and the judge may say, okay, you've satisfied the criteria that this child cannot return to this parent for
whatever
reason said. And the judge will grant them a custody order which frees the child for adoption. That is when we then match the child with a potential adopter. We go through that process for the child to be formally adopted by their adoptive parents. Adoptions are closed in Grenada, so we wouldn't disclose to the parent where the child is, who they're with, unless a new adoptive parent is open to that. But generally, it's a closed adoption. What some adopters do, even if they wish to remain it closed, they may agree to send a picture once a year to the Child Protection Authority that we can pass on to the birth parent to give updates on the child. Some are happy to have that relationship with the birth parent and have them part of the child's life. But again, once the judge stamps that adoption order, the adoptive parents are now their legal parents, and whatever they decide is in the best interest of their child is what's going to happen. So any contact with birth families after that is at the discretion of the adoptive parent. So technically
the adoptive parent have no legal or no bonding of getting in contact with the original parent.
They don't have that. No.
All right.
They don't have
well, let's take a break for this segment. We're coming back and we certainly have much more to talk about. We also give the listeners and viewers an option. If you do have a question or two or you some sort of a concern, you also have an option. You could also call in and we will certainly see if we can answer that. We're coming right back.
Grenada, it's our 49th independence celebrations. It's not just about reflecting on the past, but charting the way forward for national development, improving lives and livelihoods, and embracing our mission for visible transformation. That time is now, and the vision is for everyone. It's about our civic responsibility. From Saturday 20th January to 5th February, we joined the National Celebrations Committee for cleanup and beautification projects island-wide in the following communities. St. Andrew Southeast, January 28th, in front of Marquis Hard Court. St. Andrew Southwest, January 28. Munich Junction and School Gap and Carlton Junction. St. Andrew Northeast, January 28. La Poterie Junction, Tivoli Junction, Moya Junction, and Paradise Junction near Seamoon Roundabout. St. Andrew Northwest, Birch Grove Junction. St. David, January 28th and January 29th. Major junctions include Latant, Pomrose, Malmont, Roucaine, Bellevue, Coles Gap, Corinth, Redgate, Westerhall Point, and Penmata. Town of St. George, January 29th, the alley between Halifax Street and Melville Street. February 5th, behind the bus terminus. St. George Northeast, Willis Playing Field, Willis Medical Station, and Tempe. St. George South, February 4th and February 5th. Carlish Junction to the top of Carlist Hill, Coffee Bow and Stones, Pandy Beach, Mount Hartman and the entrance of Lansapines, Montu, Plainfield and Main Road, Woburn Mangrove and the area surrounding Calavini Community Center. St. Patrick East, January 28th, La Fortune Junction to Riverside Junction, and Hermitage. It's about national pride, a people zealous for the love for this country and its greater good. Over 30 community groups have been empowered with executing this independence cleanup and beautification campaign targeted at litter prevention, protection of the environment, and public health, while fostering a deeper commitment to community spirit. Who will emerge as the best village depicting the true spirit of independence? Support community development by participating in this national cleanup and beautification venture. There is a role for everyone. Give of your time for community cleanup or beautification. If you can't be there physically, support by providing cleanup tools and safety equipment. Be creative and provide decorations depicting these celebrations. Refreshments and transportation are also welcomed. To register your support, contact the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation at 435-8665. Grenada, it's the start. Let's do our part.
Let me say welcome back to our listeners and viewers this morning. It's To The Point for today, Friday, the 27th day of January. And with me this morning, we have Phillp from the Child Protection Authority. And we're talking alternative care and adoption this morning. And Chanel, before the break, we spent a lot of time, we talk about alternative care. Let's make some reference to Grenada in terms of alternative care. What are the types of alternative care that are offered in Grenada?
Right, so we have kinship care, which is with a family member or a close friend of the family. We have foster care, which is with an approved foster carer who is approved by the Child Protection Authority to care for other people's children. We have residential care, which is the children's homes. So those are the four types of care we currently, alternative care options we have.
In Grenada?
In Grenada.
All right, interesting. Now, when it comes to the alternative care that has been offered, is there a reason why you will suggest a particular care format for a child in Grenada?
So every child is an individual and we have to look at their individual circumstances before we make any decision on placements. Now, we truly believe that all children should remain in their family. Now, if your nuclear family, which is your parents, is not a viable option for you due to safety concerns, then your extended family is the natural next step. So we always, in our initial investigation, look for family members. We will speak to the parents and say who can look after your children while they cannot be in your care. So we will ask them to recommend who. So sometimes they will say, that's no problem, I have my sister who can help, this person who can help. We'll approach that person, do the assessment process, and once they're approved as suitable, place the child with them. If there is no kinship, and the mum and dad are like, we have no family, or we do, but for varying reasons, it's my sister, but her children are known to you as well because you've removed, if there's no viable family options or there is no family options, then foster care is the next option.
Now, in Grenada, what are some of the reasons why children are put into are put into foster care in Grenada? What are some of those burning reasons in Grenada that you have noticed, if you are able to express that?
Poverty, sexual abuse, neglect. I mean, all of them, but heavily is sexual abuse, neglect. Neglect is a ramification of the poverty that they're suffering. Physical violence between parents and the children getting caught in the crossfire, and then the actual physical violence against children are the most prevalent.
It was in Grenada.
Yeah,
in Grenada
currently.
today. Now the authority got a report that someone let's stick a pin there on the physical abuse, more or less. This child has been noticed, been abused. Their physical signs are shown maybe when they go to school. The teacher reports it. Give us a running of the process, how it goes through before you make that actual intervention.
So we received the referral from the teacher stating, the child's come to school with this bruise on them, and they said dad hit them with a cutlass, I don't know. So we would go and visit the child at school, see the child, see the wound. We would take the child for a medical. The police would become involved because there's.
I was just going to ask you that. What are the other stages that you go through
the
before
police
you?
are our biggest collaborators. We do not remove children without them.
Okay.
Because while the director has the right, the Child Protection Authority has the right to remove a child, in the initial instance, it's a police officer who has to use their police powers to physically remove them from that home.
Okay.
So when we go out and actually remove a child, we are with the police.
All right.
They are our biggest. What is the word I'm looking for? The agency that we work with the most.
Okay.
So we would then, the police would then start their criminal investigation. If the marks on the child's skin are consistent with the story that they've told, the medical doctor will give us that kind of evaluation. The police will start their process. We will speak to parents somewhere along that process to say we have this child in our care because these are the allegations, this is what we're doing, and because of the allegation we would be unable to return the child to you. Again, is there a family member, someone else, and then we start moving along that way. If the police decide to prosecute the parent, then a court case will start. We would have to get an order for the child. Every child we take in care, we have to apply to the court for an order to give us right to keep the child in our care. So the initial order is a supervision order.
All right.
Which gives us the permission to have the child out of the parent's care, but it doesn't sever parents' rights. They are still the parent and we have to work in conjunction with them. So it gives us shared parental responsibility.
Okay.
So under that arrangement, the child is in kinship care. Kinship carer, the child comes with long braids, a little boy. Kinship carer nor I can decide just to cut the child's hair. We need to talk to parents still because they still have parental responsibility. However, as the resident parent, because that's what we become now, we become the resident parent, if something happens to the child and they need an emergency, we have the right to do so. Okay. Because I can't see the child choking and say, I'm only going to call mum to ask if mum...
If you could assist, if you go and do whatever you need to do to help.
Sometimes we just have to act, and that's what the supervision order gives us the right to do. Now, if under the supervision order we're working with parents and like we discussed earlier, nothing's changing, nothing's happening, that means the children can go back. Then when we get back in front of the judge with the update, we will say we need a custody order now because this child cannot go home, no change has been made, parents are unwilling or unable for whatever reason, and therefore we need to start looking at permanence for this child, and that's when we would request the custody order. Custody order, again, gives us the right to put the child up for adoption.
Okay.
Or if the child is not of adoption age, because adoption has a time frame. Yes, 0 to... Once a child gets to about 16, it becomes very difficult. The ideal window for adoption for a child is between 0 and 5. When we get children in 7, 8, 9, sometimes there's a possibility for adoption for them. They wait longer. Everyone wants a baby. Everyone wants a child that they can nurture and groom into their family life. Not everyone wants to adopt these older children.
Some older children who may, for some other reason, may be challenged at the adopted parent, for whatever reason, they may not want someone of that nature.
I think sometimes adoptive parents think this child already knows who they are, has already been socialised into the cultures of their birth family, and is that something they can deal with? So they prefer the smaller children who they can socialise into the culture of their
and groom in their ways and
exactly.
groom in their particular way.
Exactly. So the older children. So I do not like to see a child come in at 2 and then we're giving the parent 4 and 5 years to get it together while the child is just sitting in care, because their window of opportunity is getting smaller and smaller and smaller for permanence. If when the judge decides, you know what, mum really can't make it, fine, here's your custody order, then we can't get them adopted, and then they stay in the care system. This is what we don't want. We don't want no child to grow up in the care system and become institutionalised, because no matter what you do in a placement that's not your permanent, there's always uncertainty.
Yes.
Is the foster carer going to say, I'm no longer foster caring, I'm no longer want to be a carer, so the child has to move on? Does the placement break down for whatever reasons? And we don't want them moving from carer to carer, from home to home. It happens, unfortunately, because the children who come to us because they've suffered some trauma. In suffering trauma, a lot of them can have challenging behaviours as a ramification of the trauma they've suffered. Not everybody has the patience and tenacity to deal with those behaviours while the child is taught new behaviours and new coping skills and new ways. Now, if a child is accustomed to every time something goes wrong, they curse at home and it's fine and everybody's cursing, when they go into a foster home and they start cursing,
Maybe expecting the same.
because that's what they know.
Yeah.
And then you get a foster care, well, no, I can't have this in my place. This child curses. Yeah, he does. And he's going to until we retrain him. And children are very easy to retrain. Children, as much as every child says, oh, they always want to tell me what to do, children need discipline, they need structure, they benefit from it. And when they don't have it, nothing goes well for them. So it's retraining them, having patience and understanding. And when we talk about the foster care recruitment process, we will talk about a bit about the training foster carers can receive to enable them to have that understanding and the ability to work with that child through those challenging behaviours.
No, that's the way I want to switch the conversation now to this, where we get into adoption, foster care. Now, foster care, as we all know it on a regular terms, where someone takes you in. Someone decides, well, your condition where you live is not favorable for you, as you mentioned before, so we want to take you in. Give us a process how adoption goes, how the process starts in terms of going through adoption before as we move through this segment.
Adoption or foster care you want to do first?
Let's do adoption.
Adoption. Okay, so the child has either come to the authority as a child free for adoption, or, like, say, for example, Mrs. Smith calls up and says, I have a 2-year-old child in my care, they've been with me since birth, I want to adopt this child. So we will say to them, okay, the process is you fill out an application form, you submit your relevant documents. What we have to do is an investigation into the child.
Yes.
Find out where the birth parents are, what their thoughts and feelings are on the adoption, what if they're going to consent to the adoption or not, if the child is with Miss Smith consensually, or if the child was removed and they didn't know where their child was. So we need to find out mum, dad and birth family's history. It's always important to know the history of a child because genetics are strong. So you've got this 2-year-old who you don't know too much about their family, but when we do our investigation, we find out that the family has a history of any kind of thing that could affect the child in the long term. So having that information of their genetic makeup, illnesses, family history, enables you to care for a child better. So if we find out that both parents and grandparents all suffered from schizophrenia, we now know this child genetically
may at
some point be predisposed to that. Being armed with that information informs the foster adoptive parents as to how they will care for this child long term, with the potentials of what could manifest in that child due to their genetic makeup. So we do the full investigation. Best case scenario, both parents say, no, we're absolutely in agreement. They sign a consent form saying we agree to the adoption of our child to this person. Then we don't have to go to court and get a custody order because the parents have given permission.
So there's a smoother sailing in terms of the process.
Much smoother, because then that takes out one court process. So then we finish our investigation of the child, we get consent from the parents, we then do the full investigation on the adoptive parents. What their childhood was like, the relationship with their parents, their siblings, their social network, their employment history, their health, their financial standing. We dig into everything because we need to know, are you emotionally, mentally, financially, support-wise able to provide permanence for this child in the way that we deem appropriate. So they have to go through that. They have to produce a medical, bank statements, everything that tells me who they are needs to be provided so we can assess them. So once that assessment is completed by an adoption officer, that file is then presented to the adoption committee, which is the committee is made up of a lawyer, a doctor, people from a wide range of professions. And then they will decide if they think this is a good match and that the couple are viable to care for this child. Once the committee approves it, it goes to the board, which is the board of the child protection. They run a final eye over it and to make sure everything's as should be. Once that happens, the adoptive parent through their lawyer will apply for a court date to go in front of the judge for the adoption to be ratified
and finalized.
So that's the adoption process. There is a fee and this is a local adoption.
Yes.
There is a small fee for processing, which you pay throughout that process. I think the fee, I don't want to quote it in case it's wrong, but it's some hundreds of dollars. It's not exceeding hundreds of dollars. I think it's 300 actually. So that is the process from start to finish if you've come with a child.
Let's supposedly there's an option of someone knowing that a child is in a bad state and need to be adopted. Is there cases where we consider a hard adoption?
What adoption?
When you say like a hard adoption, let me say which mean or forceful, that you want to just take a child from a parent and have it adopted. Is there any case scenario like that? So
that process is the process we just spoke about. The child's removed because whatever reason, there's no family, no one's coming forward. We go to the judge and say, look, this child has no one to claim him.
Well, I'm referencing it in terms of you mentioned that yes, the parents were in agreement in that one, but no, supposedly yes, the child is not been taken care of.
Okay,
so we just want to remove that child from the family that they are part of for whatever reason. That's why I say that hard adoption. That's where that hard adoption come.
I'm with you now. So what happens then is that we have to go to the judge for the judge to grant a custody order that frees the child for adoption if parents are not consenting. So this is why we need a custody order, which enables the authority to take full parental responsibility for that child, which gives us the right then to have that child adopted. So sometimes parents will come to court to fight that order and saying, I don't want my child adopted, I'm not signing a consent form and I'm not in agreement with this. Then there's a burden of proof on the Child Protection Authority to prove to the judge that a custody order and adoption is the only viable option for that child, and we have to prove that for the judge. Once the judge agrees with us, that's when we can move forward. If the judge says no, work with them, sort it out, then we go back and that's what we have to do.
Well, there's a scenario where a child himself does not want to leave their parent.
So children can't make the best decisions for themselves a lot of the time. So those who don't wish to leave their parents because they don't see their lifestyle as problematic because they're used to it, then that's when we have to work with them to help them understand. And a lot of the time, once they're removed from that environment and they live in a family where their care and protection is prioritised, they think, oh,
I'm seeing something better now.
I go to school every day and I get 3 meals and Auntie's always there to pick me up from school, and we go to the beach on Sunday and we go to church on Sunday. These kind of things. So a lot of the times they themselves realise this is a better place for me. It doesn't stop them loving their parents and wanting their parents and wanting to make sure their parents are okay, and that's where the contact comes into place. Right. The contact serves several purposes. It's an assessment tool for us to see how you interact with a child, if you're capable to be child friendly and prioritise their needs in that supervised setting. It gives the child that needed contact with their parent because they worry about them, especially if the child has been a carer at home to that parent. So if the parent for whatever reason was just there but not really performing, and that child made sure they ate, mummy get up and bathe, go and eat, took care of their siblings, they're removed now and they're like, oh my God, I'm not there to look after them and worry about them. So that contact gives that child a visual of, oh, they're okay. Telephone calls, as much as we can facilitate. So it's an assessment tool. It's something to help ease the child's mind so that they have that contact and to, as I said, to make sure we don't sever that bond in case the child is going back. Once a custody order is granted and we know for sure the child is going to be adopted, that's when we start cutting off contact. Okay. Because adoption's going to be closed. So we cannot have you seeing the child every week and then saying to the child, oh, but these are your new parents, and then we're confusing them because they're being pulled in 2 different directions.
Exactly. So then, for reasons, some of the parent will be telling them one thing, and then the adopted parent knows telling them another. Yeah. So that's where confusion mixes in between.
Once the custody order is granted and an adopter's been identified and the introduction process is happening, then that's when we start to wane off the contact with parents.
Well, is there any that best case scenario where the adoptive parent and the original parent has a good relationship?
Yes. Yes, it happens, and that is the best kind of adoption, in my opinion, because the child then has the stability of a family that can provide for their care and protection, but can maintain a relationship with the birth parent. But for that to happen, the birth parent has to be in agreement with the adoption, because if the adoptive parents is allowing the child to have contact with the birth parent and they're saying to them, they're not your parents, I am, and you don't have to study them, and then it disrupts that placement. And then it's not conducive for the child. But if everyone can work together, as the parents can work together, and birth family can be a part of the child's life that does not disrupt their adoptive placement, then that's the best for the child. It's absolutely the best for the child.
Now, in cases where the adoption becomes closed,
which is the case.
This is the case. It's closed. There's no longer no contact whatsoever.
No.
The parents who have adopted that child now makes the decision. I guess that's where the court will come in. Could they remove the child, say, from the country of origin?
Yes. Once your child, now, I gave birth to my daughter. If I decide to move to Mars, we're going to Mars. That's it. So once the judge stamps it, all parental rights belong to the adoptive parents. They are now legally their parents. Adoption is not even a thing anymore. These are their parents. So if they decide they're moving to Spain, it's Spain they're going. If they decide they're moving to Jamaica, it's Jamaica they're going. They have every right, once they meet the requirements of that country, visas and whatnot, they have every right to take that child and go.
Another question I would like to ask. Now, the parent who have adopted the child, that child has grown up now to an age range, and if the adoption is closed, as you mentioned, what if that child decides, I want to now reacquaint myself with my original parent?
That at 18, when the child becomes an adult, they have every right to do so.
They have every right to do so.
Prior to that, they would need the consent of their parents. So if 16, 17, they say something to parent, I want to find my birth mum, then that's, again, between them. At 18, the child has a legal right, I'm an adult, to do what they say.
They can no longer tell them, no, or you can't do that. Or
at 18,
they could say it.
They can say it, but at 18, you're legally adult. And not because you're legally an adult does it mean that 18-year-olds know what's best for them. And I always advise 18-year-olds, yes, legally you're adult, but you're still a child in your mother's house. And you should still take guidance from your parents because, you know, 18 doesn't make you wise and worldly and know everything.
Sometimes you're still dependent.
You're still dependent. You're still living at home. Mummy's still washing your clothes, still cooking your food. So this, I'm 18, I'm an adult, doesn't mean much to me as a parent, but legally they have a right to request their adoption file. They can legally seek out
and reacquaint themselves with their family if they wish to.
If they wish to.
Have you ever had the scenario of noticing where, you know, someone been adopted and decides, well, after 18, as you said, no, they're an adult, wants to go back?
Yes, and they have. They've returned to their birth families because that's where they want to be.
And now they may come to offer the assistance to the family in their own way.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go to the another subject matter in terms of foster parenting. Tell us about foster parenting.
Right, so to become a foster carer, there's a process. It's similar to the adoption process. You have to be assessed. The age range to be viable to be a foster carer is, I'd say 18, but no, not 18, sorry, about 21 up until you're able. I don't like to give an age, cut-off age, because everybody at a certain age is different. But for argument's sake, let's say retirement.
Okay.
So you apply to be a foster carer, be it because you just wish to do that or because there's a child that you want to look after, but you want to make sure it's in a way that there's some kind of protection for you and your family having this child in your care. So you put in your application form. We will screen your application form to determine if it makes sense to assess you or not. You will have your home assessment where a foster care officer will come to your home. You'll show them your space that you're offering to this child. Let's say it's a married couple with 2 children, and let's say the children are, 9 and 18. We're going to talk to your husband, we're going to talk to the wife, we're going to talk to the children. Because it has to be a family decision. Everyone has to be on board. Because if mum wants to do it and dad's not too fast, it could cause conflict.
Problem could start coming in there.
If the 9-year-old thinks, I don't want this child in my house, and then it makes the child see trouble, it's not going to work. Everybody has to be on board. So we will speak to your family. We will ask for references. We'll speak to your neighbours. We need to know who you and your family are. We need to know about your background, your childhood, your relationship with your family, what your support networks are, what your religious beliefs are, what your thoughts are on homosexuality, on how comfortable you are talking to children about sex and drugs. Because these are all part of parenting.
Yes.
And a lot of our children have been exposed before their time to things that you might not talk to your 9-year-old about. But this 9-year-old, by virtue of where they've come from, is
they've
very
been exposed to that
They've
already.
been exposed.
So they're coming with an issue.
They're coming with knowing more than you think a 9-year-old should know. So are you able to deal with that kind of behaviour? So we do the assessment and police check. We do a police check. All is well. All seems well, so you're approved. What we'd like to do is to provide training. So challenging behaviours. What is trauma and what behaviours manifest because of the trauma they've suffered. First aid, just, but mainly as a parent, some people, I've got 4 kids. None of your kids suffered what this child suffered. So parenting this one child could be totally different to you parenting all 7 that you had and who all of functioning members of society now, because they didn't suffer the trauma that this child suffered. So fostering is not just, I'm a parent, I know how to parent. It's how do you parent a child who has suffered trauma, whose behaviours are a ramification of that trauma, whose culture is different to yours. How do you do all of that and still love and care and protect for them? So that's where the training comes into it.
Is there a limit in how many children you could be foster parent to?
I don't like any one carer to have much more than 3 children, because you're going to turn into a children's home after a certain number, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a home environment where the child receives the love and care of a parent. And if you've got so many children, the time and attention
you weren't able to give that individual attention, especially the one that needs it.
And if you've got 4 children all suffering from 4 different types of trauma, all needing, it becomes too much for one parent, 2 parents, I believe. So 3 is the ideal. We are so short on foster carers. We need foster carers. We need people to apply. And so that some of our foster carers are overworked because we don't have any other option. And I God bless them. They are amazing. And the work that they do and what they deal with and what they give to the children is absolutely amazing. But because of our small numbers of carers and the amount of children we have, some of our carers are definitely overworked, and I need carers so that we can distribute children evenly amongst the carers. So because if you're running from an empty cup, there's nothing to give, right?
Exactly.
So I need my carers to be emotionally well, fit and healthy, and if they're overrun, then the care they can provide is going to dwindle.
All right. We've been talking a lot, and certainly, the information is vital, and I'm sure the listeners and viewers out there may have a question or two that they may like to ask. And at this stage of the program, we will be we are allowing callers to pop in and ask a question or two. Let's go to the phone line. I think we do have a caller. Caller, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Go right ahead, caller.
Yeah, go. The guardians who adopt a child, is there any follow-up supervision for the child? That's the people who does the adoption. All right? That's the first one. We are very good at proper articulation, but we are very poor at work ethics and productivity. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, caller. Thank you there. You want to answer the first question?
Sure. So the first question was what follow-up is there after adoption is made. So for the first year of adoption, there is 3 follow-up. So quarterly, every 3 months, a visit will be made to the new adoption family and the child. The child will be seen separately as well from the adoptive parents, because of course we know if there is any issue, speaking about it in front of your parents is going to be difficult for the child. So we'll do 3 follow-up visits over the first year. Once no issues are identified, we would then close the case. Okay. If anything crops up over that year and the family need any assistance, i.e. they're struggling with the behaviour of the child, we can help them with referrals to counselling agencies or whatever else the case may be. And unfortunately, sometimes adoptions break down. And so if the adoption's breaking down, then we can assist with trying to stabilise it. And if it gets to the point where it really cannot be stabilised and it's just not going to work, then about looking for next options for the child and
have you ever noticed that, especially in a Grenada society, where someone adopts a child and decides after a period of time, as you mentioned a while ago, I don't think I can manage, that particular child, him or her, it's just become too much for me than I expected. and no, they decide they want to sever the ties.
That happens sometimes, and that happens in the teenage years. Those are the most difficult years. As we know, we've been teenagers ourselves. That's a time when we're testing boundaries, where we're finding ourselves.
That will become a little bit rebellious.
We become rebellious. And sometimes the behaviours at that time for that looked after child become so much for the carer that they think, I just can't do this anymore. And again, this child, having suffered a trauma at 5, 6, then raised all the way up to 15, and all the time it's all been great. And at 15, whatever happens to them at 5,
starts to kick in again at 15.
Or there's certain ages where our genetics kick in. So there's that nurture versus nature argument. So you can have a baby from 6 weeks old, and that baby's been raised in your family, never heard a curse word, never heard, lived this idyllic life, and then they get to 13 and they start stealing, or they start excessively lying. And when you look back at the history of their family, they come from a family of kleptomaniacs, a family of, and these things kick in at that point. At that point, that's when we try our utmost to work with the families, because at that point it's going to be referred to us as a new case. I have a 15-year-old who's running the streets doing this, drinking and smoking, I can't cope. And that is sometimes the children we work with as well. It's not always the parents have an issue. Sometimes the child, especially in those teenage years, in that rebellious stage, to an extreme where the parent can't cope, and sometimes they reach out to us for assistance on what do I do with this child.
All right.
So we work with families like that as well.
We do have another caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, and to your guests. And I'm wondering if, as you said, that they are short on finding adopting parents. Why should you think that there should be a limit once if somebody is asking for 5 children, and they figuring out that they can maintain the 5 children, 10 children, 20 children, they should be left to have it. I think that's the best way to go about this whole thing, because if you say you're short on finding people, one person intending to, and sometimes the most support one child has from another child that is in a positive situation, the chances of the child going up very well is very good. That's what I'm saying. Take care.
All right, caller. Thank you so much. I don't know if you gasped what the caller was trying to say. I guess what he's saying. He's trying to say, well, as the authority, if they're having problems in terms of the amount of children that you have to put into foster care, there's not enough. He's saying maybe it's okay to give them more. But you said you don't agree that more than 3. I'm not sure if it's necessarily your personal opinion or is the opinion of the.
I manage that section, and I see the stress it can have on one carer having more than 3 children, depending on the needs of the children. Now, as I said, remember, these are not your happy-go-lucky, go to school, come home, change your clothes, go and play, do your chores, go to sleep children. These are children that have suffered a trauma, and their behaviours means that they need a bit more care than the average child. So, for example, she's got 5 children. 1 is suicidal, 1's an absconder, 1's stealing at school, and she has to keep going to the school for that child. How's she going to cope? How's she going to spread, or he or that couple spread themselves so thin trying to meet the individual needs, the exaggerated needs, more than a normal child? And I don't want to say normal because these children are normal. However, the traumas that they have experienced means their care needs are greater. So I cannot give a carer these children. Now, if I had 4 children who came from one family, they have no challenging behaviours, we want to keep them together, of course I'm going to put them with one carer. But if in that time 3 develop really challenging behaviours and it's too much for that one carer to cope with, then we have to look at the health and care of our carers. Yes, the children are our priorities, but like I said, if the carer is not emotionally fit and well and strong, they cannot give the care the child
Exactly.
needs.
You don't want to give them that additional stress.
No.
Let's take another caller. Caller, good morning and welcome.
Call again.
We guess we lost that caller there. 435-2041 if you do have a question or two that you may like to ask. And I do understand what you say. You don't want to put an additional burden already with the burden of having to take care of the children and know the stress of the problems that they already have to take care of.
Just keep adding and adding. It's not
They
fair.
may not be able to give the adequate attention.
It's not right. It's not fair for the children, because remember, we're taking them from one environment and saying we're putting them in a better environment where they're going to receive better care. If because of the volume of children in that placement they're not receiving better care, then we failed them.
Okay.
And that's not my job to fail children. It's to make their life better. And we are an authority run by human beings. So yes, mistakes are made and not everything is as great as it could be. But we're not robots. We have to do things by our gut feelings, by what's presented to us, by the checks and things we do. So it's not a perfect system, but it's a system that we're working our hardest to make as good as it can be for the children who cross our doors.
Let's entertain another caller. Caller, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, GT.
Good morning to you.
And good morning to your guests. GT, hear my concern. I know your guests have other backgrounds other than the present one. Based on our population size and our economic potential, the existing situation with child and children, which I assume is of alarming proportion. What are some of the causes or the root causes of that alarming proportion of child and children abuse? Please give me a little insight into what is the core of our problem with child and children. Thank you.
Thank you also, caller there. Are you prepared to answer?
Yes, I am. I don't think it's just in Grenada. It's worldwide. It's a number of things. It's poverty plays a big part. If you're raised in a family where you didn't have access to education, you didn't have access to something as important as formula as a baby, your development. So when you become a parent yourself, if you were raised in a family that struggled financially, you wasn't able to access education to a degree where you can elevate yourself from the level your family was at, then you start having children and the cycle continues. Yeah. So I think poverty, education, substance misuse plays a big part in the number of children that we have to take into the care. Parents who are drinking and smoking and taking drugs to the point where they're just incapable of even looking after themselves, let alone their children. Sexual abuse, that is a very big one here. The rate of children who are sexually abused by their birth families, by neighbours, and the amount of people who know about it and say nothing is a major, major problem. And we always say that child protection is everyone's business. Now, if you live next door to a family and you know the son is being sexually abused by the father and you say nothing, you are complicit in that crime. We need to talk up. Referrals can be anonymous. You don't have to give your name. You can just say there's a child in this house at this address. You need to check it out. You don't even have to tell us your name. We will go and do the check. A lot of times people are afraid to report because they don't want the backlash of, oh, it's you who say, and fall out with their neighbours. Referrals can be anonymous. Even if you give a referral and you give your name, we would never give the parents or the child, the person who made the referral, would never share your information, so that we can protect. We want to protect referrers because we need them to refer so that we can do our job to help the children. Okay. So I'm still trying to understand why the sexual abuse of children is so high in Grenada. And there was a recent study that showed that Grenada, considering the population, I think the population had the highest rate of child sexual abuse. Again, because we're so small, that number looks more alarming than a bigger country.
Exactly.
But the reality is that is a label we have.
All right. Let's take another caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome.
Yes, Mr. GP, good morning, and good morning to you guys. I have a question. Now, if a young lady, say 17, gives birth to a child, and at that time the father has abandoned her, she doesn't have any body family support is not there, and she gives that child up for adoption. That child is adopted. Now, after 6 years, 7 years, she becomes somebody who can take care of a child. She wants her child back. Is that possibility exist? And how difficult would it be for her to get back her child now that she's able to perform the performance of a parent, responsible parent? Thank you.
Thank you also, caller.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there is no way to get that child back. Adoption is final. Parental rights are severed and they are transferred to the new parents. Mm-hmm. So for that child to come back to that parent's care, that would be when the child is of age to seek out their birth mother, or that the adoptive family are open to the child having a relationship with her at that point. So that's the only how she would be able to have a relationship with the child, if the adoptive parents facilitate that.
And permits that.
But if they don't, she couldn't come back to the Child Protection Authority and say, look, I'm married now, I'm able, I can I want back my child, and we will go and look for the child, because adoption's final.
Yes.
That adoption would have to have broken down and the child come back into the care system. And if the mother appears and the child is there, then we could assess mum. But once their adoption is going strong and is working, that the likelihood of that child being taken from that adoptive placement and returned to their mother is zero.
All right. So I hope the caller do understand that. Chanel, Phillp, rolling once again, we're coming to that stage of the morning where we have to put a shutdown on the program. I'm not sure if there's any final word you want to throw out there this morning, especially to our viewers and listeners, prospective, individuals who may want to be foster parents, someone who's considering adoption. Anything you want to throw to that before we take it
I would say that anyone who is willing and able to become a foster carer, please do apply. We need foster carers. We need to be able to provide home environments for children who have been removed from their homes and not place them in residential care. So to apply to be a foster carer, you can call the authority. You can pop into our office on Scott Street to collect an application form. The number you can call is 422-7881. That is my number, so I'm willing to talk to you directly about the foster care programme and how that works. And for those who wish to adopt, same process, fill out application form and we get the process moving. But we do need foster carers, and I don't want anyone to think, well, I can't do it because I've got 2 children, or I can't do it because I'm not married. If you have the desire to do it, contact us. We'll let you know if you're viable. Anyone with the space in their home, with a clean police record, and who has the ability to work with the type of children we have and is open to training and the police checks, will be assessed.
All right.
Let us assess you. Don't rule yourself out. Let us assess you, and we'll, if for some reason you
may have a flaw or two, but sometimes it could be overlooked for whatever reason.
I mean, as long as you're not going to be a danger to that child, and you're going to do your best to promote their welfare and their care and protection, and also be willing to work with us as the authority, because we don't just give the children and it's do as you like. Yeah. There's still things that has to happen. They have to go to contact. They have to, there might be court cases. So it's more than being a parent. It's being a foster parent, and that word foster means there's more to it.
Okay.
But again, that can be discussed. Anyone who's interested, please do contact the authority. Do let us know, and we will work with you.
All right. Once again, Chanel, thank you so much for being here. Fruitful information. I've certainly learned a whole lot this morning, and certainly hope we could do this again. Maybe have another shop line that we could entertain.
Definitely. I'd like to have some of the other team members come and speak to it as well, because I sit from a management position, but they sit in the actual role. So their perspective, and
they may have other experiences that you may not be able to share with me directly.
That they can share with you. So definitely we'll send a staff member next time.
All right. So thank you once again, and all the best for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey folks, that's where we come to the end of To The Point for today, Friday. Join me again next week when we will have another edition of To The Point. Have yourself a great weekend, all our listeners and the viewers. Until then, have a good one, folks. That's why I say goodbye.